I have a question. So first of all, thanks to all the speakers of this afternoon. It was really engaging. I'm Antonietta Grasso from Naval Labs, also for the benefit of the people listening online. So my question is this one. Severin was mentioning an example of a service that could be designed either as a dyadic interaction, so in the case of autism and a number of projects that have examined how a robot could help to teach the proper communication codes, or in a multi-party fashion, still in the same context. So my question is, when you choose or you think or you imagine a service, how do you, if at all, examine the need for a dyadic or a triadic or a multi-party type of interaction? So Severin again was arguing for human-human interaction and this insertion of the robot as a facilitator, which I think could be imagined in many situations. No? So I was wondering if and how you examine the various possibilities. Thank you.
Well, it's difficult to answer that question in the broader sense. In the activities that we had on the robots, most of them came from what the children were telling us they would like to do or could like to do with the robot. And you're right, some activities were probably more suited for one-to-one interaction, like the example I gave about like the cuddle, for instance. The robot would not have been able to take 5 kids at the same time. Or even like the chat when the child was just talking to the robot, even though probably that one could have worked with more than one child at a time. But some of the other activities, one that was working quite well is it was some sort of interactive storytelling where you could choose what was your hero and what the hero was going to do and what kind of adversary he was meeting, and then the robot would tell a story. This is something that could work in a one-to-one interaction as well as a group interaction. And the point you're making about the fact that at the end I was arguing for more human-human, like robot-supported human-human interactions. I mean, we did not design that specific study for that specific question, and it was kind of interesting to observe at the end that most of the interactions were actually one-to-one. The children were not that much looking into doing group activities with the robot, or activities together supported by the robot. It was probably due to the fact that the way we designed the study with robot in the corridor, one of the reasons why we did that is because in that school, kids were not encouraged but could freely get out of the classrooms if they felt like upset or like they felt that they needed some space to breathe. And so in many cases, they were alone in the corridor and then they would go to the robot. So maybe in a different setting, we would have seen more group interaction in front of the robot. But in that specific case, I think the design was really bottom up. It came from what the children told us and not so much what we wanted to elicit. So that's maybe something to explore. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on that.
Thank you.
First, thanks for all speakings, and it was really fascinating. I have one question about the key application of a robot. So in Sylvia's case and also Marion's case, I've seen the elderly people tend to speak to robot and they seems very happy with it. So they are not really reluctant, but rather willingly to speak to a robot. And I don't know if it was successful or the conversation continued, but somehow it feels like the speaking or speech interaction is kind of a key application for the robot. That's what something resonated to my mind. And here the question is, back in the days, many companies, including Google, Alexa, whatever, they made tons of AI speakers. I don't know how successful they are in Western market, but at least in Korea, they are all fail. And many companies try to make AI speaker successful, but none of them are succeeded in the market. Even Naver tried. Naver made some AI speaker, so-called. It failed. So what makes really difference a robot as a conversational like friend if you compare to AI speaker? Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so that's really a tough question, I would say. Because in the case that you saw with elderly people, there were not so much verbal interaction. They were very limited because everything was on board. I do have experience with speech interaction in very quiet environment with another project of mine that's the bartender one. In that case, it's very complicated because, of course, it's a public space, so there is very loud interaction. So we had to start from the hardware. So the hardware should be reliable, so the microphone should be reliable. So we had to start from that. But apart from the technological point of view, the difference with the interaction with this specific robot is the context. So somehow the interaction, the robot have to keep a model of the user and have to use this model to continue in an interaction with an history. So it's not just making a question, having an answer, but it's like referring to the past, referring to the habits, the kind of interaction the user wants. Because there are, for example, people that just want, for example, go to the bar and order something and then leave. They don't want to interact at all, but there are others that want to like hearing jokes or stay talking with robot, even though it's a robot. So the robot should be able to profile, and then there are, of course, a lot of other problem of ethical issue, but then that's the key in order to have a meaningful interaction on long term.
What is a successful conversation? I would ask. So this is, I would take the thing like that, and if my partner, robot, human, I want an exchange, then a successful conversation is about this exchange. And if I just want to be listened to, then a successful conversation, it's a place where I could feel that I'm listened to. So, because we saw what Silvia is also showing, the fact that there is no answer, but the fact there is something there, this alterity, feeling of presence of the other, and just to start talking, and that's all. I mean, sometimes it's just that. There are some things that work. Have you ever tried Replica? I don't know if you know this AI conversation is not with voice recognition, is with chat. It's working very, very well. It started mischievous conversation. Now they specialized in partner coaching, psychologists. So. And what was interesting is it's open, it was a window. Once you start talking, writing, it was a window to intimacy. And lots of stuff have been told there. It was like a confessionary. Confessionary. So yes, so what is, again, the goal of the conversation? And I only want to say bye-bye because I'm going to leave. So yeah, thank you all.
So I can add something from my experience. So in the first experience in the retirement home, actually the elderly have tactile modality that he could also use, and the speech modality of interaction. And what we observed is that no one came and touched the screen. So I think the speech modality, as you said, is future works in our domain, especially for elderly people, because as we see, no one went there and just touched the screen. They directly, when there was interaction, asked something to the robot. But still, there is not strong speech recognition or speech development.
going to add another word to that. Yeah, to be fair, your question is the summary of the whole field, is why do we even bother with social robots? What do we expect from them? It's very hard, and I'm not going to pretend that I have an answer to that question. Maybe one concept that is interesting is this idea that comes from the education field, actually, the concept of being with someone. And we labeled it in one paper a long time ago, with me-ness. How much are you with me? And it was, in the context of education, it was more like, are the students following what the teacher is doing? Are the children with the teacher while the teacher is teaching? But when you think in terms of conversation, in terms of engaging with the technology, like being with the robots is interesting. It's not just talking to the robot, but it's being there physically. It's being there socially. We are doing something together. Maybe we are looking at the same thing. Maybe we are thinking or working out something together. And I don't like to focus too much on the conversation side of things. You're right, we are biased toward that because of Alexa, because of all the smart speakers that have shown so much like incredible achievements, to be fair, and yet they failed in many cases. And I think conversation is one side of being with someone else, but in many cases you can be with someone without speaking, maybe sometimes even without doing anything, just being there. We had all that research on social presence. What is the impact of just being there? And well, we were discussing with Gerard yesterday about like conflicting results, and it's not always clear what's the impact of just being there. But I'm very much, I mean, we had many discussions today and yesterday about having a holistic approach that takes into account not just one modality, many modalities and many facets of that. And, sorry, I'm not answering your question. I'm randomly thinking aloud, but yeah.
And I can add something else about the second establishment where we were. At some point, we have some trouble in the Thiago robot, and it's a robot that if it's just like not the program was not open, but the robot was how to say turn on, and he had the head that look at the person. So the professional just put the robot beside the people without any programming, without any activities, just the head was moving, and it was a social presence for the people.
Yeah, that sounds similar to the experience of Jérôme when he was telling about all the nows looking at him.
So perhaps just to follow up the idea of this multi-party interaction, and to follow up also on conversation. In fact, the skill of conversation is it's very subtle. To be able, for example, to have a neck, we have discussed this, to have independent neck movement and eye movements. That enables the humans, in fact, to direct attention to either a group or only one person. So the art of maintaining involvement of a group of people in a conversation means that you have you have to understand the art of the conversation of human beings. So it has very important consequences in design of a robot, even in mechanical terms. A second point is that you said the loop in the loop. So, for example, this problem of alignment is very crucial. You have to have a listening agent, so to provide, for example, free feedbacks, saying and so on, to encourage people. In fact, even to you don't intervene, but you deliver incentives to say, pay attention to what you are saying. So this problem of alignment of rhythm, so you use text-to-speech system, but you have to control the text-to-speech system in order to align with the rhythm of delivery of information, to adjust to the cognitive capabilities of the listener or the listeners, and so on. So, in fact, it's we put technology. So I think the problem is that we put technologies on the shelves, together just to build up, in fact, a set of modules that are minimally, in fact, interacting with each other. But we have coupled systems. And we have to think about, you know, how to have a more subtle coupling between verbal, co-verbal behaviors and also perception and action. So it's not a problem only of selecting, you know, the proper what to do next. It's really when you do something, you have to have the proper skills and the proper, how to say, bias to, for example, you know, you have been speaking about how to produce gesture from speech. I'm tackling with this, but you have a style. You have the personality of the people. You collect a lot of things from the TED, but the TED Talks, you have different people with different subjects to promote, different stances in the even in the 3 minutes, the few minutes of interaction. So the style of you cannot put everything together. And in fact, those gestures add something to the discourse. So you have to really understand what are the intricate coordination between this multimodal interaction, and not only put modules which are just like Ross, for example, they are just saying to the other module what do we have to do next. They have really to bias the way each module is in fact behaving. I agree. Yeah, you agree?
Yeah, absolutely right. So at the moment, we take existing technology, speech recognition and text-to-speech and a language model and some computer vision, and they're all separate things that we kind of, you know, put together with I don't know, sticky tape and rubber bands. But it's not, you know, even though we say it's integrated, the resolution at which it is integrated, also the temporal resolution is just so poor that you get a very bad interactive experience. Yep, absolutely right.
Yeah, I've got a question because you've been deploying lots of robots in the wild, interacting with vulnerable populations such as children, autistic children and elderly. And I was wondering about your strategies or like the way you handle breakdown in the interaction, because I expect that when you've got robots there, at some point the speech detection might not work, like the robot will have some issues. And so do you have any recommendation about how to handle breakdowns?
We're having a breakdown now.
What are you talking about?
So, as you've seen on the video, we just let the interaction going and see what the impacts it's make on the social organization. Because breakdowns are parts of social robotics because they are not perfect tools. So we have to analyze these impacts also. And so we just don't interfere with that.
Perhaps a very last question. Oh, sorry.
To answer your question. I'm confused now. I can tell you. I mean,
I think you have plenty of time to interact with each other.
just very briefly about what you were asking, Emmanuel. I don't have any magic wand, so I don't know. Like I think there's two approaches. One, the one we took with the children with autism for like the autistic children is that the behaviors were. It's not that they were so well. Let's say they were so simple that it was unlikely for the system to fail, essentially, or when the system was failing, it was not the end of the day because they would just move on to the next activity. In the case of when I told you about this robot we deployed in a daycare center, and I told you it was a failure, part of that was that the robot was never really working as well as we wanted. The speech recognition, indeed, even with, well, older adults, I suppose, but was not something robust enough to be relied on. It's not even the fact that we were not able to recognize the speech, but in one of your example, it was in one of your example, I think, where we see that the speech goes fast, like people are asking question and another question and jump to the next thing. And and none of our chatbots today are able to deal with this kind of topic changes, rhythm of the discussion. So it just doesn't work. And so the consequence is we took the robot home. So it was not very convincing. It was how it was.
Also have to tell you a little bit of story. For example, in case of elderly, when the robot was like crashing, the software was crashing, the screensaver of the robot was pumping out. And once a lady called me and said, every day everything is not really interactive, so the robot is not interactive too much, but it just offered me flowers. Because of course she saw the flowers and she was thinking about that everything was okay, but the robot was offering flowers. So in some cases, people do not recognize that there is some troubles. That's fine for us. In other cases, what we did, of course, in less critical situation, for example, not for the vulnerable people, but for the bartender interaction, we just put out jokes. In sense, there are a lot of social failures there because, of course, the recognition of speech may not be perfect. But then in that case, it's a specific case where it is a friendly interaction, we just cover up or try to cover up by using jokes, for example.
So now we all agree that, in fact, the interaction is with a robot is very subtle. So we are missing subtle things. So the next question is how to evaluate this miscuing. So, the problem is that our evaluation procedure, using mainly MOS, you have 20 minutes of interaction with a robot and you say, was it pleasant, was that attentive, was that, and so on. So you mean opinion score between 1 and 5. And you get 2.3, good. So I think we have to make progress to put effort in evaluation procedure, to have a glass box assessment technique that is able to identify at which point, at which time, something went wrong in the interaction, and to do reverse engineering to cope with this problem. Okay, so.
I'm
still agreeing?
Yeah, no, you're right. So if we're trying to build these systems, and it doesn't matter what it is, it's a speech recognition gesture or the whole package, we need to evaluate and we need to be able to compare one system against the other. And on the one hand, we could do this with objective measures, a loss function in a model or something. The trouble is that we then optimize only for that loss function. The best evaluator out there is us, people. Yeah? And what we found over the last few years was the best way to compare to robots or AI interactive systems is to put them next to each other, let people have a conversation, and then choose which one they prefer. And so in that way they can compare, so they have something to as a kind of a baseline to compare to. And if you do this repeatedly with lots of different raters and lots of different systems compared to each other, you can actually really quickly rank them and say, like, look, this one is better than the other one. And it's because we humans are so incredibly good at evaluating social interaction. We do it all the time. The moment we wake up, we are evaluating social interaction from, I don't know, listening to the radio, watching people walk down the street, watching the bus driver pull up at the bus stop, to driving a bicycle. We are constantly being social, and so we are so good that we are the ultimate evaluators of artificial systems.
Worse than this one.
Yeah.
The guy. So you have a mouchoir. What you do is a mouchoir, something like a mouchoir. Yeah, you have several competitors, and you can order them by comparing between each other. But at the end, the engineer that has fabricated this system, how we can improve, in fact, its functioning. When you just give a note to a child, nowadays you don't give notes anymore. You say you are on the way of acquiring these skills. Yeah. So, which skills? How far are you? So to have some kind of assessment procedure that can drive us to a better performance afterwards.
If you know that, you'll get a Nobel Prize. It's the million-dollar question, you know. But typically in machine learning now, we'll say just it needs more data. We're going to throw more data at the problem. We can't do that. We can't. This doesn't scale. So we don't really know. We know something is missing, but how to get there? Yeah, no one knows at the moment.
Yes, I cannot help myself to go back to my question, because maybe I didn't phrase it completely well. So, how do you decide when it's best to fully automate a human task versus assisting a human task? So, for example, you have been describing a teaching activity. You could imagine the robot autonomously substituting the teacher, or you could imagine a robot assisting during a human teaching to a pupil. So for that reason, I was recalling the example around autism, because you see what I mean with that reference?
That's interesting. I kind of guess it connects to the idea of mutual shaping. The fact that once you have a piece of technology that seems to work well enough, then as a user you kind of shape how it's going to, what kind of role place it will take, and how you want to share your social space and activities with him. The example of the gym coach is really interesting. For the other study with the robot teaching the children about the food chains, the teachers were actually researchers. They were not the actual teachers. But for the gym coach, we were working with someone who was not a roboticist, and we did that for a long period of time, 3 months. So after 3 months, for 3 months, every day he was working with a robot with him to assist him. Or well, at first he was kind of teleoperating the robot, and then little by little the robot was becoming autonomous. So he ended up with a robot that he had taught how to become a good enough coach for this kind of running training exercises. And I really encourage you to have a look at the paper, because Katie did an amazing work on doing interviews and qualitative analysis of the interviews. Actually, it's not in the paper, it's in her thesis, so you should read her thesis. And we still haven't published the paper. Anyway, it was in 2019, so there is no excuses. We should have been anyway. But long story short, the way the gym coach was describing the robot at the end was using vocabulary like, "Oh, my assistant. Oh, that's great, because actually, when I have a new customer arriving, I let the robot do the warm up with the new customer while I'm doing the stretching with the previous one. So that really helps me." He was describing, without us putting any words in his mouth, he was describing its interaction with the robot as, "Oh, we found a kind of a teamwork." And he was also really proud, because he had the feeling that the robot was able to do what he was doing because he taught him how to do that. So it was not like, "Oh, we are bringing you a piece of technology, now you have to work with the robot and the robot will help you." No, it was not like that. It was, "Oh, I have trained my own helper, my own assistant." So in terms of acceptance, both in terms of acceptance and, more importantly, in terms of transparency of the behavior, it was amazing, because the behavior of the robot came from what it was taught by the user. So it was transparent. We have these big issues, questions around AI, explainable AI, and so on. But if you're the one who taught the robot, then there is no problem anymore. You know what the robot is doing, because even though sometimes it was surprising, like, oh, I would not have done that. Ah, but actually, yeah, why not? Because I mean, I did show you a few examples where the robot was not generating the exact same policy, but it was working well. So I'm a strong believer. Well, sometimes in HRI we forget a little bit that the user is going to adapt to the robot, and it's not only about designing a robot to adapt to humans. It's a symbiotic interaction, and that's exactly what we saw in that case.
And it's actually part of an ecosystem, and the ecosystem can be even larger than just the two of them. Yeah.